I was in full-blown labor on the side of a highway, screaming, terrified, and alone. My mother told me not to embarrass the family, and my father said, "This is your consequence." They left me there like I was nothing. Why? Because my pregnancy didn't fit their picture-perfect reputation. My parents cared more about my sister's exam schedule than my contractions. A stranger, an old truck driver with gentle hands, delivered my baby while my parents drove away without a glance. I thought that moment would break me, but it didn't. It transformed me into someone they never expected. If this made your blood boil, you're not alone. Family should protect, not abandon. Tap that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Revenge Motivation for more shocking family revenge stories where justice finds its way, no matter how long it takes. Rachel Montgomery had always been the quiet achiever in her family. At 26, she was a graduate student in sociology, sharp-minded, soft-spoken, and obsessed with understanding human behavior. Ironically, she had no idea how warped her own family dynamic was, until it nearly killed her. Her parents, Diane and Charles Montgomery, were pillars of their affluent upper-class community. Church every Sunday, charity galas on Friday, and a strict moral code that painted every family member into a flawless portrait. Rachel's older sister, Bethany, was the golden child, straight A's, piano recitals, and on track for medical school. Rachel? She was the nice one, as long as she stayed invisible. The trouble began during Rachel's second year of grad school. She met Jacob, a fellow student with a rebellious streak and an artist's soul. One night of vulnerability turned into an unplanned pregnancy. When she told her parents, hoping for support, her mother's face went cold. "You will not destroy what we've built. Do you hear me?" Diane hissed. "This family has a reputation, Rachel," Charles added. "If this gets out, we'll be humiliated." "You'll be a single mother dropout," Bethany chimed in, barely masking her disgust. "Pathetic." From that moment on, Rachel became a ghost in her own home. No baby shower, no comforting words, only rules. No one in the neighborhood could know, no doctors in town, no family conversations about the baby. Her mother told the church group Rachel was abroad doing research. As her due date approached, Rachel planned to take a cab to the hospital quietly, but her contractions came suddenly, late one night while she was staying at her parents' home. In pain and scared, she begged her parents to take her to the hospital. They agreed, but not for the reason she thought. They didn't want her calling attention to the house in the middle of the night. Rachel lay in the back seat, sweating, crying, barely breathing as each contraction ripped through her body. Then, halfway to the hospital, she screamed, "I can't! Please pull over! I need help!" But her mother turned around in the front seat, eyes blazing. "Bethany has a major exam tomorrow. We can't have noise. We can't have drama," Diane said coldly. "Get out if you can't control yourself," Charles muttered. They stopped the car, and they left. On the shoulder of Interstate 87, under the harsh glare of passing headlights, Rachel collapsed. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A rumbling diesel engine pulled over. A trucker named Joe, gruff-looking, maybe 60, with weathered skin and a soft drawl, jumped out. "Are you? Oh God, you're in labor!" In the back of his rig, wrapped in flannel and prayer, Rachel gave birth to her son. Joe called 911 and stayed with her until help arrived. He didn't ask questions. He just kept saying, "You're doing great, sweetheart. You're not alone." That night wasn't just the night Rachel became a mother. It was the night she stopped being afraid of her family. Something inside her shifted. Her parents never visited. They told relatives she had moved away with the father. But Rachel kept a diary. Every scream, every betrayal, every moment her family made her feel worthless. She wrote it all down. That diary, it would one day become a national bestseller. 10 years later, that quiet girl would be the one holding the microphone, while her parents sat red-faced on live TV begging for mercy. But Rachel wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. For weeks after giving birth, Rachel felt like she was floating in a fog of exhaustion, disbelief, and raw pain. She had delivered her son, Noah, in the back of a truck, cradled in the hands of a stranger, while the people who were supposed to love her most vanished into the night. At the hospital, she signed her own forms. No emergency contacts, no visitors, no one to hold her hand, just her and the tiny boy in her arms, who looked up at her with quiet, trusting eyes. The nurses were kind. One of them, a woman named Carla, sat with Rachel during feedings. She didn't pry, but after learning Rachel had no support, she said something that stuck. "Sweetheart, you survived what many wouldn't. That kind of pain, it either breaks you or rebuilds you. And I think I know which one you're gonna be." Rachel smiled politely at the time, but the words planted something deep inside her. A slow-burning ember. A question. Why had she spent so long trying to please people who saw her as nothing more than a blemish? Once discharged, Rachel didn't return to her parents' home. Instead, she moved into a women's shelter for 2 months before getting placed in a subsidized housing program. With the help of social workers and sheer grit, she finished her degree online while raising Noah on her own. Her parents never called. Not once. No birthdays, no visits, no gifts. It was like she had died, and they preferred it that way. But Rachel was not dead. She was waking up. She poured everything she had into raising her son with love and truth. She never lied to him, even when he was too young to understand. When he asked, "Where's Grandma?" she told him gently, "She didn't want to be around when you were born, but that's not your fault." At night, after putting Noah to bed, Rachel would write. She wrote about everything: her pregnancy, her family's cruelty, the moment on the highway that changed her life. She didn't plan to share it. At first, it was just a way to cope, but the more she wrote, the more powerful she felt. And then, one day, everything changed. It started with an email. A small publisher had come across one of Rachel's blog posts, a short story about a woman left in labor by her family. They loved the raw honesty. They asked if she had more. Rachel hesitated, then sent over her manuscript, a memoir titled "The Child on the Shoulder of the Highway." 6 months later, it was on shelves across the country. Rachel Montgomery became a sensation. TV interviews, book tours, podcasts, everyone wanted to hear from the brave woman who survived abandonment and turned it into art. She was hailed as a voice for women who had been shamed by their own families. A fighter, a survivor. But Rachel never mentioned names. Not yet. She referred to her parents only as D and C, and her sister as B. Readers assumed they were metaphors, symbols, fictional placeholders. That illusion came crashing down the day her parents showed up, uninvited, at a book signing event in her hometown. Rachel had just finished reading an excerpt when she saw them at the back of the room. Her mother's hair was thinner now, her father looked 10 years older, and her sister, now clearly out of medical school, stood with her arms crossed, face stiff with something between shame and anger. They waited until the crowd cleared out. "Rachel," her mother said softly, "we need to talk." She didn't respond. Her father tried next. "Your book has caused some issues. People in town are asking questions." Rachel met his eyes for the first time in over a decade. "You mean your friends are embarrassed? That's what you care about, right?" They didn't deny it. Her mother stepped forward, reaching out. "Look, things got complicated. But we're family. We're still your—" Rachel pulled back. "You're not my anything." Then came the real reason they were there. Bethany had been caught in a financial scandal. Their family name, once a symbol of perfection, was now dragged through the mud. They were broke. Investors had pulled out. Community respect? Gone. And now, suddenly, they needed Rachel. "Your success could help repair our image," her mother said with a nervous smile. "We could do an interview together. A reconciliation. It would look good. For all of us." Rachel stared at them, stunned. They had left her to give birth alone on a highway, and now they wanted her to save them? It wasn't rage she felt. It was clarity. She had spent years thinking of the perfect revenge, and now they were handing her the opportunity on a silver platter. She agreed to meet with them again, on one condition. They would join her for a televised interview, a sit-down conversation. Rachel told them it would be a healing moment, and a chance to rebuild. Desperate, they agreed. What they didn't know was that Rachel had already informed the producers. The show would not be scripted. No pre-approved questions. Full transparency. And for the first time, Rachel would speak their names. The interview would be live. The world was about to learn the truth. And this time, the shame wouldn't be hers to carry. Rachel had rehearsed the moment 1,000 times in her mind. Not the yelling, not the crying, not even the confrontation. She envisioned the silence, the deafening pause that would settle across the studio when the truth came out on live television. No edits, no apologies, just the raw, unfiltered story of what her parents had done. This wasn't about vengeance for vengeance's sake. This was about truth and making sure that those who had weaponized shame and silence finally faced the consequences they had avoided for years. The plan started quietly. After the tense encounter at her book signing, Rachel contacted her literary agent, who happened to have connections at Tell Me Everything, a primetime syndicated talk show known for its explosive confessional episodes. It had a weekly audience in the millions and a track record of taking down America's perfect families one lie at a time. "I want a full hour," she told the producer. "And I want my family there. I'll get them to agree." The producer, whose face lit up halfway through Rachel's memoir, didn't even blink. "You give us the real story," he said, "and we'll give you the platform." Next, Rachel approached her parents again. But this time she played the long game. She didn't lash out, she didn't scream. Instead, she smiled. "You were right," she told them. "Maybe we should reconcile publicly. It would be good, for all of us." Her mother's eyes lit up. "You mean, like a full-circle redemption story?" "Exactly," Rachel said smoothly. "A family reunited. A daughter forgiving her past." Her father cleared his throat. "That could really help us right now. Rebuild the family name." Rachel nodded. "We'll call the episode Healing on Highway 87. They bought it. They had no idea she'd already sent the show producers every hospital record, social service file, blog post, and private diary entry she had ever written. Everything was fact-checked, legally vetted, verified. There would be no escape once the cameras rolled. In the weeks leading up to the broadcast, Rachel did press tours for her now second bestseller, a follow-up memoir titled In the Shadow of Silence. In every interview, she was calm, soft-spoken, even kind. She never revealed names. She saved that part for the live audience. Meanwhile, her family was parading around town again, acting as though the Montgomery name had been redeemed. Bethany posted a filtered photo with Rachel captioned, "Families fight, but love always wins. Can't wait to share our story soon." Rachel didn't comment. She was too busy reviewing the episode script with the producers. Though the format was loose, Rachel had asked for one specific setup. She would walk on stage alone, tell her story uninterrupted for the first 15 minutes. Only then would her family be invited to join her. The team agreed. They knew ratings gold when they saw it. Behind the scenes, Rachel requested one more thing: footage from a highway traffic camera that had captured the night her parents left her. It was blurry, but clear enough to show a woman stumbling out of a car on the shoulder, holding her stomach. Then the car drives off. It would play silently in the background as Rachel spoke. She also requested a guest to be flown in: Joe, the trucker who delivered her son. He hadn't seen her in a decade. When producers reached out to him, he cried. "I always wondered what happened to you," he said. "You and the little guy. It haunted me." When she heard that, Rachel cried too. The week of the taping arrived like thunder. Rachel picked out her wardrobe with care. Simple, professional, and powerful. No tears, no dramatics. She wasn't there to beg for empathy. She was there to reclaim the narrative. The studio was packed. The audience didn't know what was coming, but the producers did. The energy backstage was electric, like something massive was about to erupt. 10 minutes before going live, Bethany texted her, "Let's make the family proud tonight." Rachel didn't respond. She stepped onto the stage, under the hot lights, and looked into the sea of faces. Then she began. My name is Rachel Montgomery, and when I was 26 years old, I gave birth to my son alone on the side of a highway because my parents thought my contractions were less important than my sister's sleep schedule. Gasps, stunned silence, and she was just getting started. The moment Rachel finished her opening monologue, the studio lights dimmed briefly. Then the screen behind her flickered on. Grainy footage from the highway appeared, time-stamped, silent. The audience saw a dark-colored car pull over. A young woman, clearly in distress, struggled to stand. She clutched her stomach. She screamed. Then the car drove off. No dialogue, no music. Just the undeniable, soul-crushing truth. Gasps spread through the room like wildfire. One woman in the front row started to cry. A man in the back muttered, "Oh my God." Rachel stood silent, letting the image speak. Then the host stepped forward. Let's bring out Rachel's family, Diane, Charles, and Bethany Montgomery. The audience barely clapped. The three of them walked on stage, stiff and pale. Diane wore a forced smile. Bethany looked confused, like she'd missed something crucial. Charles kept his gaze fixed downward. They sat opposite Rachel, who didn't offer a greeting. The host didn't waste time. You've just seen footage that appears to corroborate Rachel's story. Would you like to respond? Diane was the first to speak. Her voice shook, but she tried to maintain authority. Well, we didn't abandon her. That night was chaotic. She was screaming, and Bethany had an exam. She was giving birth, Rachel interrupted, voice steady. I told you, I begged you, and you left. Bethany jumped in. You always exaggerate things, Rachel. You make everything about you. Mom and Dad did their best. Rachel turned to her. Bethany, they left me on asphalt while you got a full night's sleep. And you've spent the last 10 years pretending I never existed. Charles finally spoke, voice hoarse. We made a mistake. We were under pressure. The host raised an eyebrow. You made a mistake by leaving your daughter in active labor on a highway? No one answered. Then Rachel delivered the final blow. I'm not here to beg you to admit anything, she said, turning to face the camera instead of them. I'm here to name it. This is what toxic parents look like. Not because they're evil, but because their pride mattered more than my life. She paused. And now, they want my success to clean their shame. The silence was deafening. Then came the twist. The host smiled. We have someone else joining us tonight. The man who didn't leave Rachel that night. Please welcome, Joe Simmons. The audience erupted as Joe entered. His beard was grayer, but his eyes still warm. Rachel stood and hugged him tightly. The audience gave a standing ovation, not for Rachel's family, but for Joe. Diane flinched. Charles looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Bethany's face crumpled in disbelief. And Rachel? She stood tall. When the host asked Joe to share what he remembered, he didn't say much. Just one thing. I saw a scared young woman screaming for help, and I knew I couldn't just drive past. Then he looked at Rachel's parents. You did. The rest of the interview unraveled fast. Public opinion turned immediately. Social media exploded. The Montgomery family name became a symbol, not of prestige, but of cold-hearted, image-obsessed cruelty. Clips from the show went viral. Rachel's monologue, the footage, Joe's quiet truth. Rachel's book sales soared again. Her parents' emails were flooded with hate mail. Bethany was dropped from a pharmaceutical board position within a week. Charles lost his consulting job. Diane was asked to step down from the local church council pending further review. Rachel didn't have to lift a finger. She simply told the truth, at scale. And that was enough to bring down the entire house of cards they'd built on shame, silence, and secrets. Justice doesn't always need fists. It just needs a voice brave enough to speak the truth. If you felt Rachel's power, hit that like button and drop a comment below. What would you have said to her parents on that stage? And don't forget to subscribe for more family revenge stories that prove silence is never the final chapter. The days following the televised interview were a hurricane. News outlets dissected every second of the footage. Morning shows debated whether Rachel's actions were brave or brutal. Talk radio buzzed with callers either applauding her courage or gasping at the coldness of exposing her own parents. But Rachel wasn't focused on headlines. She was focused on Noah. He was 10 now, sharp, gentle, and already wiser than his years. When he watched the interview replay with her the next day, he said quietly, "You don't look angry, Mom. You look free." Rachel hugged him tighter than ever before. She had told the world the truth, but privately, she wasn't done. The televised interview may have destroyed her parents' public image, but it hadn't brought accountability. Not yet. Because Diane and Charles Montgomery still hadn't admitted what they did. They still clung to the excuse of mistakes, still told their remaining friends that Rachel had distorted the past. So Rachel planned one final reckoning, this time not for the cameras, but for clarity. She invited them to meet at a neutral space, a private mediation office in the city, with a professional therapist and a legal observer present. Not for lawsuits, but to document the conversation. They agreed, though reluctantly. Their lawyer had advised them to repair damage before it spiraled further. But Rachel's only demand was simple. You will listen. You will not interrupt. And you will not deny. The day of the meeting arrived under gray skies. Rachel dressed simply, in dark navy, no makeup, no entourage, just her notebook, the same one she had used to journal every moment of her pregnancy, abandonment, and rise. Inside the room, the atmosphere was brittle. Diane looked stiff, her pearls noticeably absent. Charles looked thinner, the toll of public shame etched deep into his jawline. Bethany didn't come. Rachel sat across from them with stillness that was louder than rage. The therapist opened the session. We're here to allow Rachel to speak, uninterrupted, about her experience. This isn't about apology. It's about truth. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Rachel began. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. Her voice was calm, her words razor-sharp. "I'm not here to relive every moment," she said. "I already did that in my writing. You've read it. Or at least I hope you did." Charles shifted uncomfortably. "But what I need to know, what Noah deserves to know, is this. Why?" Diane opened her mouth. "No." Rachel held up a hand. "Not yet." She pulled out a printed photo, the highway traffic footage from 10 years ago. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. "It's the last moment I ever believed you would protect me. After this, I stopped being your daughter. I became my own person." She turned to her father. "You told me that night I was a consequence. Do you still believe that?" Charles lowered his eyes. "I was overwhelmed. It wasn't meant that way." "But you said it that way," Rachel replied. "And I've carried it every day since." Then she turned to her mother. "You told me I was a disgrace, that my pain would embarrass the family. You silenced me, you erased me, but now the world knows I exist, and they saw everything." Diane blinked, lips pressed tight, but said nothing. Rachel leaned forward slightly. "This is your last chance, not to change the past, but to stop lying to yourselves." The therapist nodded, as if confirming. The moment had arrived. There was a long pause after Rachel's words. The room sat in stillness, suffocating in the weight of things unspoken. The therapist watched quietly. The legal observer noted every moment. And Rachel, steady, patient, waited, not for an apology, but for the truth. Finally, Charles cleared his throat. "You're right," he said, voice rough. "We left you. We thought you were ruining everything we'd worked for. The reputation, the image, the structure. It was selfish. It was cruel." Rachel didn't respond. She turned to her mother. Diane stayed silent, lips trembling. "You told me I ruined the family," Rachel said quietly. "But I was the only one in that family who fought to survive. I bled alone on a highway while you kept Bethany's tea warm for her midterm." Diane's eyes began to fill, but still, no words. Rachel pressed on, more calmly than ever. "You've built your whole identity on perfection. Church, community, discipline. But I see now, it was all performance. Behind the scenes, you sacrificed your own child for control. That's not parenting. That's abuse. You are toxic parents. Those words landed hard. Charles flinched. Diane's eyes finally blinked a tear away. And then, Diane spoke. "It wasn't supposed to be that way," she said, barely audible. "We didn't know what to do. Your father and I, we panicked. Bethany was everything we thought we needed to be. And you scared us." Rachel laughed softly, not bitterly, just with quiet disbelief. "I scared you? I was 26, pregnant, and asking for help. You weren't scared. You were ashamed." Diane looked down. "Yes," she whispered. "We were ashamed." There it was, the admission. For the first time in 10 years, Rachel's mother told the truth. Not on camera, not for an audience, but face to face, and it wasn't enough. Rachel leaned back, crossing her arms. "You didn't come to the hospital. You didn't send a single card when Noah was born. And yet, the second my story became valuable, you showed up with open arms. Not for me, for yourselves." Charles started to speak again, but Rachel stopped him with a raised hand. "I'm not here to forgive you. This isn't that kind of ending. But I needed to hear you say it, out loud, that you chose Image over your own daughter's life, because now I'm done carrying your silence." She stood, slowly, strong, unshakable. "This is where our story ends," she said. "Not in rage, not in reconciliation, just truth. You gave me life, and then tried to erase it. But I lived anyway." The therapist nodded, confirming the session could end. Rachel gathered her notebook, nodded to the legal observer, and walked out. Outside the building, the sky had cleared. A beam of sunlight split the gray. Rachel breathed in deeply, not for the cameras, not for drama, but for herself. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was the author of the ending. In the weeks that followed the final confrontation, Rachel didn't speak to her parents again. There were no calls, no letters, no last-minute apologies. And that, she realized, was exactly how it needed to be. For the first time in her life, there was silence. But it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. She no longer checked the news about them. She no longer worried about how they would twist her story, or whether distant relatives would send her passive-aggressive messages. She had told the world, and more importantly herself, the truth. That was her freedom. Rachel had redrawn the boundary lines of her life. She was no longer the daughter trying to earn love. She was the mother building something stronger from the ashes of what came before. As for her parents, the fallout continued. Charles was quietly removed from several corporate boards. Former colleagues distanced themselves, and donations from once loyal patrons stopped flowing to their once prestigious charity fund. Diane, who once organized church galas and women's retreats, was asked not to lead anymore. Her name, once synonymous with class and discipline, now triggered side-eyes and murmurs in every room she entered. Bethany, though she never spoke publicly, deleted her social media accounts entirely after being dropped from 2 high-profile research projects. Her spotless resume no longer outweighed her last name. But Rachel didn't revel in their downfall. That wasn't the point. Revenge, she'd come to understand, didn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it meant separation. She had not ruined them. She had simply stopped protecting their version of the story. And when the truth stepped into the light, their power dissolved all on its own. With the noise behind her, Rachel turned her focus fully to Noah. They traveled to the coast, the mountains, quiet lakeside cabins where they skipped stones and read by firelight. She watched him grow more curious, more confident. He asked questions about courage, about integrity, about why people hurt each other. She always answered honestly. One night, while tucking him in, Noah whispered, "I think you're really strong, Mom. Not because you fought, but because you walked away." Rachel blinked back tears. In that moment, she knew. The generational cycle had ended. The line of silence, shame, and image control that once defined the Montgomery family had snapped clean in two. Rachel hadn't just survived toxic parents. She had defeated them by becoming something they never imagined, whole, visible, unafraid. Spring came early that year. The air was soft with the scent of blooming magnolia, and for the first time in over a decade, Rachel felt no sense of dread when her birthday arrived. She didn't wake up thinking about who might forget it, or what pain the day used to carry. Instead, she woke to the smell of pancakes, Noah's first attempt at cooking solo. There was flour on the counter, a burnt edge or two, but Rachel smiled through it all. "You made these?" she asked, sitting at the kitchen table. Noah grinned, proud. "Yep, and I only almost set the fire alarm off once." They laughed together, the kind of laughter that comes from years of surviving and finally thriving. Rachel had sold over 2 million copies of her second memoir, but more than the numbers, it was the letters that meant something. Hundreds, then thousands, from women and men who had been silenced, gaslit, disowned, abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love them. People who had endured toxic parents and never told a soul. Now, they were writing to her, thanking her, telling their stories. "I thought I was the only one. Your book gave me permission to speak. You helped me understand what happened wasn't my fault." Rachel kept every letter in a wooden chest by her writing desk, tied in ribbon, like artifacts of a war survived. She was no longer just telling her story. She was helping others tell theirs. Therapy had become a ritual, not a lifeline. Writing was still sacred. And Noah, growing taller and wiser each day, was her anchor. Their home was quiet, not because it was empty, but because it was safe. One afternoon, while they sat on the porch watching the sun melt behind the hills, Noah turned to her and asked, "Do you think you'll ever talk to them again?" Rachel took a deep breath. "I don't know," she said truthfully. "Maybe one day, but only if they stop pretending and start healing, just like we did." He nodded, thinking hard. "Do you forgive them?" She looked out at the sky, soft orange bleeding into purple. "I forgive myself," she said, "for waiting so long, for believing their shame was my burden, for not walking away sooner." She looked down at him, her voice steady. "And that's enough for now." Noah leaned into her side, resting his head on her shoulder. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was light, earned, whole. Rachel knew life wouldn't be perfect. There would be days when old wounds ached, when questions returned. But she also knew one unshakable truth. She was not broken. She was transformed. And if her story had taught her anything, it was this. Sometimes, the strongest kind of revenge is building a life so full of peace, love, and honesty that the people who hurt you can no longer reach it.